My name is Michael Mandrusiak. I'll be saying a little bit more about myself in a little bit, but for now, I'd just like to introduce and invite up Alf Dumont, an elder from Indigenous Services, who will be doing a welcome for us.
Alfred Dumont, Indigenicaz, Bedaben Magizi Anishinaabe ni Wintz, Wawasheshki and Dodum, Shanaga and Dujnaba, Coquetlam and Deanungum. I just shared with you that my name is Alf Dumont. I've also been given the name Break of Day Eagle. There's a teaching behind that. I come from the Martin clan. I originally came from Shanaga territory on Central Georgian Bay in Ontario. I now live in Coquetlam territory. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam. And as an Indigenous person from the East, I acknowledge that I walk carefully on the land that is not my own and respect the land of the people who are here. We each have a story as we journey through life. My story begins when I used to go out walking. I remembered my story. I stood on the edge of a river and looked across the river to the traditional territory of the Shanaga Anishinaabe First Nations people. My mother and my grandmother left the reserve and married outside the First Nations community. So they had to leave the First Nations community, and that was the law of the time. It took until in the early 1990s for us to help my mother regain her status. And that was part of the discriminatory rules and laws that the government had in terms of First Nations people. Women lost their status, men did not when they married outside. That's part of my journey. To sort myself out in life, as we all have to do, I had to look back on my story. When my mother and father married, they brought together 4 different bloods. Anishinaabe, Irish, English, and French. When I was growing up in public school, I was bullied and harassed by both First Nations and non-First Nations people. We had a mixture in our school. And because I was a sensitive young man, I was picked on. And it's interesting that those who bullied me when I went to high school also became my friends. So it produces a lot of conflict within inside yourself. So I had to sort through who I was. Part of the journey, and I encourage any of you at any age to include this in your journey, I went into psychoanalysis, which is about 3.5 years for me. That's Freudian psychoanalysis of 5 days a week at the 50-minute hour, to sort through who I was. I also went through psychosynthesis, bioenergetics, and Rolfing, and numerous other therapies. Partly because you have to know who you are, and sometimes it takes different therapies to help you see different parts of yourself. We are diverse people within inside ourselves, as well as dealing with diversity outside ourselves. And if you don't understand who you are, you really can't help other people follow their journey. My psychoanalyst once said to me, Alf, you have 3 people inside you fighting another. And if you look back at the history of Canada, you will see that the Irish, the English, and the French fought against First Nations people, and First Nations people fought back. That journey is part of who I am. So I had to deal with that struggle inside myself. And you only come to terms with it when you look honestly at who you are, where you come from, and who are the people who influenced you in your journey. then you can help other people sort through who they are. It's not easy. It's a lifelong journey, and it's a story each of us share. But some of us don't want to share our story. And it takes a long time to build up the confidence that you have within inside yourself to share that story with others. So I encourage you to share your story. I also was involved in group therapy as well. I don't know if you ever sat down with a group of about 30 people who you didn't know and shared your story over 6 months. But that's a good thing to do as well, because we all need to find out who we are and to feel proud of who we are. Pride doesn't come until we discover that all of our roots are what make us. So, Che Miigwech for listening.
Thank you so much, Alf. Again, just welcome to today's Diversity Circles event, Neurodiversity on Campus and Beyond. And we are very happy that everyone's here. As a group, we've worked as allies for many different areas of diversity, and we look to continue to do that. Looking at resources such as the United Nations Declarations of Indigenous People, affirming also that all peoples contribute to the diversity and richness of civilizations and cultures which constitute the common heritage of mankind is something that we look to follow and continue within this group and so forth. We're very excited today to premiere our newest video. This is a worldwide premiere. So I'll let the video speak for itself. The discussion of diversity and equity that we've done with Diversity Circles has really enhanced what's happening at BCIT. There's lots of groups that are doing great work around campus, but sometimes they're not linked.
We're really blessed and humbled to have the knowledge holders from Indigenous communities with us, and today was a great example of that. We're so fortunate to have the wisdom of the elders shared with us, to have elders participating in our events, other staff from Indigenous services, visitors from local communities and even distant communities, and it's just amazing to have that.
When we came together before contact, it was material things. We didn't know money. And we would give certain gifts, handmade gifts. And this is how we grew up. You talk about diversity. I have a difficult time standing up here, because it does nothing to your mind to understand what I just said. I have jobs within my community that then it's meaningful for me to communicate those words.
We're really looking to grow the relationship with the people that we've met on campus who are part of this work, who are living this work every day, who are doing it in the classrooms, in the hallways, in their offices.
I think Diversity Circles has just expanded. I think from the very beginning they were looking into getting involved with all community members across campus. I think that just naturally happened. I think pride is growing on campus. I think support towards Indigenous services is also growing. Diversity Circles has really kind of started the foundation for all of those different areas, for people to come together.
I think it's really important projects like this to remind people to connect with each other outside the classroom and to learn their stories and learn how they all fit into this community. And to me, it's important to highlight those things.
It has been actually quite extraordinary to see the impact that it has had. I've attended a couple of workshops. You know, it was interesting to see those conversations happen and to see the way that people progressed in their thinking even during the course of the workshop. And to hear people have this real enthusiasm for it and to want to try and implement something similar in their own organizations. And that's been really encouraging to see as well.
And really diversity is just understanding that we don't know everything about everybody, we don't know where everyone's coming from, but we respect where those people are coming from and we honor that they have the space and the room to be who they are.
You know, in Indigenous communities, the communication was quite sophisticated. The way we have always appreciated diversity of voices. You know, we'll never agree on everything, but we can still sit in a circle and still have conversations and still be ourselves.
I think the more we feel that we're part of a community at BCIT, the more work will get done, the better we'll work together. And I think it shows not just within our work relationships with each other, but it affects the entire institute, it affects the students, it affects our standing in society. It's all a good thing.
We know how diverse we are, but we share common stories in that diversity. And I think that's what we're discovering here at BCIT, that we are diverse people, but we share common ground. And on that common ground, we can start to walk together in a good way.
Learning about all these different cultures, this will help inform my practice. I have to immerse myself in other people's culture to be able to serve them better.
I think the other thing about diversity circles is that it should hypothetically create exponential change, like ripple out to many other areas, and that's really what we want for it. We don't want it to be contained, we want it to ripple out into people's lives, into people's communities, into their teaching practice, into their work practice, and if we've done it right, it will ripple outwards and have that type of impact.
Great. Okay. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for coming with us and spending a lunch hour with us. My name is Michael Mandrusiak. I'll be telling you a little bit more about myself. First of all, I just want to acknowledge kind of that as a settler here on this land, you know, it's my privilege to be able to work and live on the traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and I give thanks for that. I'm also feel really honored to be here with a Diversity Circles event and being part of this. So when I was asked to moderate or MC, to take your pick of the kind of terminology, I kind of was very touched by that, and I think that this is something that's been really exciting happening here, and I hope that the conversations we have today ripple out, like Shannon was saying in the video there. So I hope we get a bit of a ripple effect from what happens today. If you haven't met me yet on campus, it may be that in BCIT terms I'm still a bit of a neophyte here. So I've been here for about 8 months in the role of Associate Director of Student Access and Wellbeing. That's working with student health services, counseling and student development, and the Disability Resource Center. At the Disability Resource Center, we're actually in the process of changing the name to something that's both inclusive of individuals who identify as having a disability and those who may not identify as having a disability but still benefit from those services. So that's something that's going on there right now, and have a great team who's helping me with that. Some of whom are right over there. Now, we're all friends here, so if I have some of that delicious salad in my teeth, just at some point I want you to let me know. You can just put up your hand and help me out with that. Today we're going to be talking about neurodiversity. So certainly within the units of counseling, within the unit of Disability Resource Center and health services, we kind of often be serving individuals who might identify as neurodiverse. In my work as a psychologist over the years, I've also kind of worked with people who identify as neurodiverse. But I also have to admit to people, so I'll just confess so that you may not feel bad too. I had to look up neurodiversity when I was asked to do this. I said, sure, I'll do this. And then I went home and figured I better do some reading about this. So I thought Shannon Kelly would be really impressed because I took Neurotribes out of the library. But when I told her about that, she said, you need something more academic. And she sent me a much longer reading list that'll keep me going for the next 5 years. So a couple of things I learned is, one thing I learned was that the term neurodiversity kind of originated in some of the autism support communities, although since it's kind of broadened out a little bit. So I'll just read kind of from Neurotribes. I'm going to stick with my own reading here. Sorry, Shannon. Here's what the author had to say. neurodiversity is the notion that conditions like autism, dyslexia, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder should be regarded as naturally occurring cognitive variations with distinctive strengths that have contributed to the evolution of technology and culture rather than mere checklists of deficits and dysfunctions. So you can hear in there kind of an acknowledgement of kind of a strengths focus instead of a pathology focus kind of and appreciating difference in what it brings to society. So I'm going to keep kind of just my opening piece a little bit short here because we've got lots of great panelists, and this may be a little bit rapid fire. The format is we have three panelists here who are going to be speaking kind of to their work in a professional capacity with individuals who may kind of identify as neurodiverse. I'm going to introduce kind of the three panelists we have today kind of individually, and they'll each speak to their experience. We'll then have a roundtable discussion followed by the next three panelists who are going to be presenting together and time permitting, we'll have another roundtable discussion. So that's kind of a little bit of the format, and hang in there with us. It may be a little bit of a whirlwind, but I think a lot of interesting discussion to be had. And also, if anybody's hot in there, you can. That's why I'm wearing a suit jacket, is just to be in solidarity with you, with the warmth in the room. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn things over to the first speaker, who is Lynda Beveridge. Lynda Beveridge is a registered clinical counselor with a small private practice in Burnaby. In her counseling work, she specializes in working with young adults and also families and couples where one or more people have an autism spectrum disorder or ADHD diagnosis, which either self or medically defined. Of course, at BCIT, she's more famous as an instructional development consultant in Learning and Teaching Center. And a fun fact about Lynda, something I did not know before, is that at home, Lynda is the carer for possibly the only diabetic domestic rabbit in North America. So if you need more information about that, you can talk to Lynda afterwards. But that's not what she'll be talking to us about today. So welcome, Lynda. Okay.
Hello, works? Okay. And a caveat to this whole thing is I wrote it all up beautifully, I practiced it, and it's like 12 minutes, and I have 5 minutes. So it's going to be completely different and off the cuff, okay? How do I post forward? There we are. So I'm drawing on my PhD research, which is using a phenomenological approach. And when you use phenomenology, I don't know if you're used to that, it really is about doing a collective narrative, coming down to an essential essence of experience amongst multiple people. So you kind of like create a mosaic, if you like. So I'm going to talk about the gifts of difference, and starting with that of a parent. So when you're a parent, almost any parent will tell you that having a child profoundly changes their life, right? And they find joy in things like the child evolving and growing and trying new things. And they talk to you also about the frustrations of the time suck, their energy, and how they're focused and they don't have any time to themselves anymore. Whether your child is neurodiverse or neurotypical, that's the same. Like, same thing. But having a child with a neurodiverse perspective in life has transformed my life. It's transformed me personally and professionally, and it's allowed me to find joy in the tinier things that you normally take for granted when you have a neurotypical child. An example of that would be a squeeze of your hand. It's also allowed me to become more empowered as an individual. I've had to learn how to fight. I've had to learn how to fight bureaucracies and systems. And through that, I've become more empowered and self-assured. I've learned how to trust in things I can't control. And I've learned that grief and unconditional love are intertwined. I've learned a new way to breathe. I'm a mother, and my son has Asperger's syndrome. My whole life, everyone has told me, from my teachers to my employers, the feedback from relatives is, wow, you're so understanding, so compassionate, and so inclusive. I'm just naturally that way. And it could be that that's my DNA, and it could be that those are the gifts that growing up in my family gave me. I've learned to be also the fighter of the underdog. And if I had to take any position in life, that's what it would be. I want to make a difference. And maybe that's because of my brother, but maybe it's just because of that's who I am. I'm training to be a teacher. And I'm going to be a high school teacher so I can make a difference. I want people to feel included in the world. I'm interested in what their perspective is when they sit on the periphery. How do they see the world? How do they experience it? And when do they want to be included? People don't always ask them that, but they want to be included. I want to be a difference maker. I'm 21. I'm a post-secondary student, and my brother has high-functioning autism. I'm at BCIT. I am a subject matter expert. I've been a teacher for about 6 years. But I know it. I thought teaching was about transmitting information, helping students understand subject matter expertise. I never knew anyone neurodiverse. I didn't experience that before. Everyone in my family and my circle of friends is what you would call neurotypical. And I never even experienced neurodiversity or thought about what it might mean for a student in my classroom until Sarah came into my class one day. Sarah definitely, I would say, is inquisitive, critical thinker, charming in a lot of ways, but she does march to a different drum beat. And I really felt out of my depth, and I didn't know what I didn't know. So through collaboration and talking with people, I started to learn that inclusion is more than examination accommodation. It's actually about trying to have relationship with people so that they're learning and make their learning meaningful for them. Through having Sarah in my classroom, I've become a better teacher for all my students. I have become a better person. I've learned how to have awkward conversations and how to reach out and just show compassion to someone. Sarah is 21, and she's my student. I know I'm the same as most people, and I also know that you view me differently. Some of my differences are challenges for me and challenges for you, but also I have a lot of gifts that I can bring. For example, I don't care about politics. I don't care about the labels that people wear. I don't care about their clothing, their skin color, or their gender identity. I just want to be in relationship with people. I'm honest, hardworking, reliable, a critical thinker, and yeah, I ask a lot of questions. I don't do that to be annoying. I do it because I am a critical thinker. In fact, I actually often see things in three-dimensional, and I'm trying to make sense of it. People sometimes say, I'm a square peg in a round hole. But to me, that just means there's gaps around the edges. But I can read all kinds of different dimension into that square peg, into that center of that circle, if you let me. Try to ignore the edges, try to ignore the gaps, and I can be there too. This is not a definite deficit position. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynda. Our next panelist is Arden Duncan Bonokoski. I kind of staggered over that a little. Okay, perfect. Okay, there we go. She's the provincial coordinator for the BCIT initiative for inclusive post-secondary education, whose vision is to make it unremarkable for students with developmental disabilities, with the dis in quotations, to be included in the academic and social life of campuses across British Columbia. She oversees existing inclusive post-secondary education partnerships with UBC, SFU, ECUAD, UVic, NVIT, and UBC Okanagan, and is working to expand opportunities at BC universities, colleges, and technical institutes. So we'll have to rope her in at BCI2 soon. We'll figure out a way. And a fun fact is that Arden loves to canoe. So I'll hand things over to you.
All right, so that was a great introduction of some of the work. But yeah, so I work for the BC Initiative for Inclusive Post-Secondary, and we are a not-for-profit society. We were started by families whose sons and daughters had the label of developmental disability. And in 2001, when they finished high school, the opportunities were quite bleak. The sort of standard pathway for people with developmental disabilities after high school is commonly, or at that time in 2001, sheltered workshops or day programs. And what these families saw was that 30 years later, if they went back, they would imagine their son and daughter's lives looking almost exactly the same. So they wanted to see how are other young people in Canada transitioning to adulthood and doing it in a really powerful, positive ways. And university and post-secondary is a pathway that probably everybody in this room has taken to find jobs that really reflect who you are and give you opportunities to contribute. So we support students at the 6 campuses that were mentioned. Through our partnerships, students are enrolled in programs of study as non-crediting participants. So that means they have access to the undergraduate courses of study. They're enrolled in classes, and the work can be modified as much or as little as the student requires to engage. The families who started this made a commitment that inclusive post-secondary would be for anybody who wanted to learn. So to be eligible for support, there's no minimum academic requirements or behavior requirements, and it's based on what a person wants to learn, and if that's offered at the university they're applying to. So inclusive post-secondary education isn't unique to BC. It was started in Alberta, and we're starting to think of it now as a movement a family-led movement to really open up opportunities at universities. There are over 18 post-secondary institutions in Alberta that include students with intellectual disabilities, and 6 in BC. And I called over to Alberta to ask for a sort of story of a student included in at NAIT, which is the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology. So when I called, I said, do you have any stories that I could use to really demonstrate how this works in a technical school? So they had one like top of mind, and they shared a story of a student named Alex who, since he was very young, has always wanted to be a paramedic. And he's somebody who was included through high school, but because of his disability, couldn't meet the entry requirements for the EMR programs. So through the Inclusive Post-Secondary Initiative, he was able to enroll in the Emergency Medical Response Program, and was really embraced by the faculty and the students in that program. So they said that they knew there would be some accommodations that the student would require in order to fully participate, but they didn't want to base his participation on their assumptions of what those modifications would be, which I think was the magic in his experience. So he was always given the opportunity to try all of the exercises that were in the class. He practiced administering IVs on his classmates, and they would practice on him, which was part of the coursework. And he's somebody who had like significant support needs in terms of some physical impairments that he had. So I think what was really exciting about the story is if you just asked how could Alex be a paramedic, people might say he can't. But by being embraced in the post-secondary setting, he was really able to try out what he was good at, learn about all the aspects of the EMR program, and now he's going to be included in the next level, which is the EMT. But one story they really wanted to share is that he had a practicum opportunity, which is typical for students. And he got to work with a company that stocks supplies for ambulances. So it was very much in line with the paramedic field. I don't think they know for sure if he'll meet the certifications to be a paramedic, but it's clear that through post-secondary, he'll be working alongside paramedics. And when you think about where else could he go to learn it, there's really nowhere more appropriate than at college. So I think inclusive post-secondary really shows us what people with developmental disabilities are capable of, and it's really redefining for us as staff and for the campuses where we are what developmental disability means or doesn't mean. And we're seeing young people come out of high school with visions for professional lives coming through post-secondary and then wanting to go on to meaningful employment. So I'll pass it off to the next panelist who can talk about that. Or back to Michael.
Arden, thank you very much for that. And so our final panelist in this set is Yun-Jou Chang, who is a communications manager for Open Door Group, a not-for-profit employment services provider that operates on the fundamental belief that every individual has the ability to succeed. In addition to supporting job seekers, Open Door Group partners with businesses to support inclusive hiring as a strategy for attracting and keeping top talent, including neurodiverse talent. Yun-Jou oversees Open Door Group's annual Untapped Gala and BC Workplace Inclusion Awards, which recognizes inclusive employers from across the province, a growing group in BC's growing economy. And her fun fact is that she has a succulent named Mort. I'm a little ashamed to admit I actually have killed 2 succulents in my office, so I might need some of her advice a little bit later. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Michael. So Mort has offspring, so if you had ever like a cutting, let me know. So thank you very much, everyone, for having me here today. It's so great to see all the faces in the room. Full disclosure, I'm the kind of person that will revise and edit and change my speech up to the very last minute. So if I'm a little bit incoherent, that would be why. But hopefully what I have to say connects meaningfully to Lynda's work and Arden's work and the work that you do in this room. So Open Door Group is an employment services provider. We operate across the province. Here in Vancouver, we run the Work BC Centre in the downtown east side, where we serve a lot of multi-barrier clients, including people who have who are neurodiverse but maybe have not been diagnosed and struggle with that. We also operate out of smaller communities like Lillooet, Sechelt, and Gibsons along the Sunshine Coast and in the interior. And so very, very different areas of work, each with their different challenges, given the local demographic and also the employers who have a presence in those communities. So I think what Lynda and Arden's talks really covered is the individual perspective and how key that is. As an employment service provider, Open Door Group sees that all the time. The first thing that we do when somebody comes through our door and says, we need help finding work, is we ask them, what do you want to do? And if they don't know, we go through a series of assessments and steps to help them identify that goal, because that's really the starting point, is where they want to be. But the other side of that equation, of course, is the systemic and the structural. So having educational institutions, training institutions who are able to support those individuals in their employment goal, as well as employers and businesses who are receptive to hiring diverse talent. So that's where we've been doing a lot of our work in the last couple of years. As some of you, I'm sure, have noticed through the media or in your own work, BC's talent crisis is here. I think we've been talking about it for maybe a decade, but now as we're talking to employers, they're using words like desperate to describe their hiring needs. They just can't find people. Last month, we got the results back from an employer engagement survey, so we sent out the survey to about 1,200 employers that we work with across the province, large and small, and the number one need that these employers identified, so I think that's 90+% of the employers who responded, said it was just finding people who want to work and are going to show up. And that's, in some ways, that's wonderful, because I think we know as the educators and service providers that there are a lot of people who want to work and are not able to find their way into these positions. So what I've been noticing is that there's a couple of things that have happened. Employers are starting to really value diversity and inclusion as a talent strategy. They're recognizing that when they are willing to make the investment to hire somebody who's neurodiverse and address those basically create accommodations that address their individual needs, they have much lower turnover, right? So the retention rate is much higher, and they're not, you're not investing, I don't even know, I think the estimate is maybe about $100,000, in training somebody, getting them up to speed, and so on and so forth, and having them leave for another opportunity. Neurodiverse individuals, people with disabilities are incredibly loyal employees to have in your workplace. They're also noticing that diverse workplaces are more creative. Not only is it more reflective of your customer base, if you provide a service or a product, having people on your team who reflect the users is very, very helpful, but also you have people who have different life experiences who then bring that to their positions. And so having these brainstorming sessions are incredibly fruitful and innovative for these workplaces. And lastly, it's a morale booster. It's actually helpful for people who are currently in the company to see that there is room for difference within the organization, and it creates opportunities for disclosure. So because neurodiversity, it's one of those things that it's invisible. You're not seeing somebody with a walker or a mobility aid or something that you can easily identify. However, you may have somebody who maybe struggles with mental health, somebody who maybe has ADHD, or they are they have less barriers but are somewhere along that autism spectrum, for example. So being able to create accommodations and essentially carve your workplace in a way to be more human and more reflective of the differences that exist within our society is ultimately also a big bonus for employers who are now starting to recognize the benefits of inclusive hiring. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Yun-Jou, and maybe just one more round of applause for all three panelists. We're going to take them off the hot seat now, and Shannon Kelly's just making her way up. She's just going to introduce the first roundtable discussion item for everybody.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks again, panelists, for those great presentations. Also, just while I have your attention, I know that it is hot in here, so when we have the round table, I don't want your entire table to leave, but if you do want to go get some more water or any more food or anything, please feel free to do that. And when you're out and about getting some more water, if you didn't sign in when you came in, there's a sign that says, please sign in. So if you could sign in, it's really important to us to keep in touch with the community, such a supportive community that we have here. Okay, so at your tables, and Kyla's the timekeeper, so she'll let us know as we go on how much time we have. But now that we've heard the first three panelists and also Michael's great introduction of neurodiversity, I want you to think about your work or your approach to your work and how that builds upon or connects to what you've heard so far today. And then from there, hopefully, possibly to think of some concrete steps or concrete actions that might come out of what you've heard so far in the room. So let's do that in round tables, but please feel free to get up and get some more water while we're kind of doing that. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. We're just because of the time constraints today, we're not going to be able to kind of go around and hear from everybody, but I could tell there were a lot of great conversations that were going on. There were kind of I was really interested in just taking part in kind of our group's discussion. There were some interesting kind of things that came up. One was just understanding, kind of self-understanding and understanding kind of where you fit kind of in relation to neurodiversity and also your communication style and how it may impact others, and being willing to adjust your communication style to kind of make room and space for people to succeed. So there was kind of that was just kind of one valuable takeaway for me from that discussion. So I hope everybody had some valuable things that they could take away. I'm going to be introducing kind of our next three panelists all together, and they've kind of got woven together kind of a bit of a theme that they're going to be discussing. So I'll introduce them. Nicole Zilkie. Nicole, do you want to wave so people is the department head of learning support at Burnaby Central Secondary. She case manages students who are enrolled in academic programs and require adaptations and accommodations to fully demonstrate their learning. She is interested in designing support models that serve students during their high school years, but also set them up for success in their future life pursuits. And a fun fact is that she sheepishly admits to having recently ordered a DNA breed test kit for her new rescue pup. Okay. And then next, Jacqui Ferraby. Is a pre-employment teacher at Burnaby Central Secondary. She works with students with learning disabilities, mild intellectual disabilities, or on the autism or autism spectrum disorder. And she's helped students transition to post-secondary and employment opportunities. And a fun fact is that she is also the junior girls soccer coach at Burnaby Central. And she briefly played with Canada's junior national team in her younger years. And we're going to be actually having a little game just outside here afterwards, so you can all join us for that. And last but not least, we have our very own Cheryl Sokol, who is one of 5 vocational rehabilitation specialists with BCIT's Disability Resource Center, where she is also the coordinator. She is passionate and honored to provide support to the students she works with, the faculty and staff who instruct students, and to her colleagues in the department. And in the BCIT community. She is stoked, though that's her word, she's stoked about the DRC's upcoming plans to develop a dynamic transition guide to support prospective high school students with a disability who plan to attend BCIT in order to maximize their success and experience. Cheryl, just where my mind went with that, in light of our upcoming cannabis policy, I was getting stoked and toked mixed up, but it's stoked. And a fun fact about Cheryl, Cheryl has recently started gardening and learned she has a spectacular green thumb for luscious weeds. But not those kind of weeds. Okay. So we'll let the panelists take it away.
I feel like I want to sing when I have a mic in my hand. No, I'll sing later.
I have to say, it's so nice to be with adults. I feel really grown up today.
I echo that sentiment.
Ditto. I know. We just wanted to talk a little bit about how we got together and how this came about, and just a little bit of the story of what we've experienced in the last 4 weeks since we've come together and got a chance to talk to each other.
So we sat down at a planning meeting, I guess just maybe even 2 months ago, and started talking about, Jacqui and I were invited to sort of bring in the high school perspective and then to participate in this event today. And so Jacqui and I are trying to figure out, what we could bring to the table, what we could offer. And we started talking to Cheryl. And I have to say, at the end of that first meeting, my brain was absolutely on fire.
We were talking very fast. What were some of the things that we were saying?
Well, we did find there's a huge disconnect between our students, what we do for our students in high school, and supporting them
and the services available at Postsecondary, and that Nicole and I realized we don't know the difference. So we're not necessarily adequately preparing our students for that transition. If we don't know what they should expect, they absolutely don't know what to expect as well.
Yeah, for Jacqui and I, our jobs are to prepare students for the outside world. And we actually thought we were doing a decent job of that. And once we met Cheryl, we realized we had a long way to go. And I think the big learning was if we don't know, and if Cheryl doesn't know what we're doing at the high school level, then I don't think anybody really has an understanding of the leap that kids are making once they leave our building and coming to a place like BCIT. We were absolutely astounded to learn the differences in support.
Mm. And when Michael at the beginning talked about ripple effects, I can only say there's waves crashing right now, and all the thinking and planning that's happening as a result of my awareness now of what the high schools don't know, and how can we start amending that so that we can better support both the folks that are supporting students at the high school level, and then also how do we support the students coming in to BCIT so that they can have the best possible experience. So we're going to start with a video, and maybe you guys can introduce the video.
Josh is you'll see Josh in the video. He's one of our students with autism, and he's would like to be a BCIT student in the near future. And we're just asking him about some of his the services he receives at high school, some of his expectations for services, and the experience he may have at BCIT.
I have autism and ADHD. And a whole bunch of other things like anxiety. And I'm relatively high functioning and I'm on the higher end of the spectrum. But that means that you wouldn't be able to tell right away that I'm autistic or not. So it's basically invisible to most people and I slip under the radar. Well, for sure, if it's in a class, I don't always understand what the teacher's saying, and sometimes the teacher can't explain it in a way I can understand.
Okay.
And usually, if that's the case, I'll just sit there and shut down, so the teacher won't know. The teacher will think I'm just being lazy, but I'm not really trying to be lazy. I just don't know what to do at that moment. And sometimes I'll be able to do most of the work in class, and then when I go home I'll forget most of it. So it usually has to be in writing. So everything that the teacher explained in class it'd be good to be in writing as well, not just the criteria worksheet. It's hard to make friends. Mm-hmm. And when I'm usually in a class where you have to interact with kids, it's hard because sometimes I don't understand what I'm supposed to be doing, and everybody else seems to know what they're doing. And when I'm shy, when I first meet people, so when I get open up to them, I can sometimes step over the boundaries because I don't really know what they are. I mean, I have to learn, and I'm learning them right now, but depending on what the topic is, if there's a conversation going on, sometimes I'll go off topic, not really realizing it, that it's bad. So, yeah. And then I'll get frustrated. The teachers at school will sometimes get prepped by my case manager, and they'll basically give a briefing on who I am and what my struggles are. So sometimes it'll help the teacher figure out how to explain it to me and we all understand, especially when it comes to academics like English. It's not so concrete, some of it, so it's hard to understand. And it helps if there's an educational assistant to help guide me along in the class. Especially when I don't understand what we're doing at that moment. And the case manager will also talk with the parents and with the teachers, and usually will check in on me sometimes to see how things are going and what they can do to help. I think I'll have a big struggle if I'm working in a large group of people, such as a lecture hall, because I don't really feel like I would comprehend what the professor, or whatever he's called, is teaching or saying. And usually what I've been told is that basically they explain their lecture and then it's all up to you to figure out what the hell he just said. So yeah, and sometimes they don't care if you pass or fail, sometimes they do. I guess it depends on who the person is. And the other problem is if we're doing a practical, I might have struggles working with peers simply because they work in a different way. And if there's someone else who's on the spectrum, then I might end up butting heads with them because we work in a very specific way. I'm hoping that there would be something along of like an educational assistant or a guide where I can go to, perhaps during class or after class hours, or even before, depending on the time of the classes, that they could perhaps help with that. So even if it was another professor or teacher, depending on how the system works, that I could go to if I don't understand what they're saying. Maybe if it's going to be a lot of information, it's basically all on paper and kind of like a lab report, you could say, where I can go read this and go copy it and basically do it. It has to be very basic for me to understand.
So that was Josh, and just so you know, to be really clear, Josh and his parents gave permission for showing the video, just to be clear, because that's a big deal in our world at BCIT, which was something that Josh talked about in the video, where he was saying, he was answering the question, how often do you know when we were talking to the case manager? Oh, if my parents tell me. Well, gosh, that wouldn't happen at BCIT because everything's written down, and if we're talking to a student's parent, the student would be knowing about it.
And I think a big learning for Jacqui and I from all of that is that for us, success looks like supporting a student in a way that allows them to be successful in an application to BCIT. So we're really doing a lot to support them and to get them to that point where they can apply and get in the door. And then we sort of say, yes, we did it. And what we realized from this experience is that doesn't set them up for success at all, because they do not have the skills to be successful here because the supports are so different. It's not like I take that hand and hand it over to Cheryl and she takes the hand and away you go. It is completely different.
I'm realizing as we're working together that I have some bad habits maybe as a teacher in terms of not adequately preparing my students. I'm really proud of some of my students who on paper have major deficits, but who are attaining graduation. But I find that behind the scenes, I'm running around, I'm asking their teachers what assignments are missing, what % are they at, all this stuff. I'm doing a lot of that, where Nicole and I are realizing maybe we should be focusing our time on teaching the students to do that and making them self-advocate a bit more as in university and post-secondary. That's what they'll need to be doing.
When they came to the office, to the Disability Resource Center, and I was showing some of the paperwork that students have to fill out, and one of the things was an exam request form, and Nicole said, do they have to fill out the form for every test? I said, yes, every test. And she said, oh my God. I can't remember exactly what you said, but we are not helping those students right now at all. So it was just quite dramatic, what the differences we were experiencing. We wrote down some of the differences between the two, high school and post-secondary. And at high school, it's automatically initiated, as you were hearing from Jacqui. It's just done behind the scenes. The student may not even know all the work that's been done with the parents and with other people at the school to make sure things are in place. At our place, at BCIT here, if the student doesn't know to come and register at the Disability Resource Center, then they don't get any services. And they also have to obviously provide some documentation, things like that. So it's completely different. And that's why we always ask instructors to have a classroom announcement so that at least students will know that there's a center here.
So in high school as well, at the beginning of each school year, we have a meeting, it's called an individual education plan meeting. The students invited, which in elementary school they generally aren't, so that's new for them in high school, as well as parents and teachers and case managers all provide input, and we create goals for the year.
And at post-secondary, there's no automatic review process for accommodation. The students are responsible for providing the documentation for their disability, and then we determine what the appropriate accommodations are based on the documentation, the policy that we have, and the students' input. And we call ours an individual accommodation plan.
So at the high school level and in the public school system in general, we have a lot of latitude to share information. So classroom teachers of students like Josh, I would go to them at the beginning of the year and I'd say, hey, Josh is in your class this year. This is what you should need. This is what you need to know about him. Here's his parents' number. Contact them. They're great. They're very supportive. They get a lot of information. They also get that individual education plan. A copy of it is always accessible to them, and it tells them a lot about who Josh is and what he needs to be successful. And parents sort of sign off on that when the child's usually in kindergarten or grade 1. And from that point on, we are free to share information of that nature with all the professionals in the building as we see fit.
At BCIT, that is not happening. The student has to sign off on letting us ever speak to their parents. And in terms of a disclosure, they're told who we're going to be sharing their IAP with. And they need to provide us the written consent.
And then I case manage 15 students. You case manage, I think, more than me. But so each student with a designation, such as Josh, would have a case manager. And I talk to their teachers, I call home, that sort of thing, whether the student likes it or not. Oftentimes the student's going, oh, did you really need to call my mom? And yeah, this is important, so.
We don't call moms. Moms call us. If we have permission, we do speak to them.
So I think just the big takeaway for us is that coming out of high school into post-secondary is 2 months for most kids. But the jump that they're expected to make in terms of the support that they're receiving at the high school level to the post-secondary level is massive. And so we really are excited to be working together to think about how we can do a better job of that, building a bit of a bridge between those two islands. And Jacqui and I have tons of ideas to go back to our high school and start to do some things differently.
Yes, and from this, we have sort of crystallized our hope to do a proposal for a transition guide that would support both the students and the instructors in post-secondary or secondary schools to better support students when they're coming to the post-secondary. So thank you all for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. So we had one more roundtable reflection to share. I wasn't sure if we'd have time or not to do. Kyle and Shannon, do we have a thumbs up for it? Okay, Kyle and Shannon say you'll rest when this is done. But we'll probably just take about 5 minutes to do this. Shannon, do you want to introduce this, or should I just? Okay.
Thank you so much. Just to clarify, and I think it's pretty clear from the description, but you are thinking of yourself as a learner and what you do every day automatically to get the information you need to advocate for yourself and to do different things. So think about yourself as a learner and some of the accommodations that you advocate for in your own learning.
Sorry to keep conversations short. We're just kind of coming to the end of the time. People will be welcome. You're welcome to kind of stay kind of afterwards and continue conversations, or you can put on your parkas and head outside. It will feel cooler when you leave this room. So thank you very much for bearing with us kind of in the heat of this room. And I just appreciate kind of the conversations that have been going on. I know that for myself, kind of in preparing for this and in talking with people, it has given me ideas about working with and supporting students and how do we shift from a perspective where we have kind of a deficit view and are saying, okay, this student's not kind of fitting into the boxes that we're dealing with, to getting creative and looking at how do we really give the student an opportunity to thrive and and find success. I was sharing just briefly, I say I was sharing an example of my life. I was fortunate enough to be able to thrive in a traditional academic setting, which is why I went all the way up to I guess the doctorate level. But if I'd grown up maybe a generation before on the farm, kind of where my father grew up, people would have been scratching their heads and saying, this guy's never going to be successful, because my father tried to teach me how to change the oil like 50 times and didn't get it. It's not my language. Sorry if anybody needs help. So how do we give people kind of the opportunities that they need to be successful and find the alignment of environment with skills? I'm going to turn things over to Shannon to say kind of a few words just about diversity circles. Thank you, everybody.
And thank you, Michael. An amazing MC. I have to say, let's have one more round of applause for Michael. Fantastic. I know that we're out of time, but please, as we said, stick around and chat and have some more food and water. I just wanted to finish with a thank you to the community. Some of you may remember that we did our first neurodiversity workshop almost exactly 2 years ago. And that was really the start. It was only our second workshop ever. And it was the start of the Diversity Circles project. And some of you probably know that shortly after that, we got some federal funding from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, which really allowed us to hold a whole bunch of different events, not just these big-ish events, but also focus groups, department-sized workshops, the 8x8 culture of mentoring program that we're having. So as we came up to the end of our SHIRK funding, we were prepared to go back to bootstrapping. This workshop, for example, the catering was provided by the LTC through the Special Interest Grant. Shout out to the LTC. But I really want, Zah and I and Kyla and everyone involved in the Diverse Circles Initiative really want to say thank you to the community, because the community has come out in droves and the support has been strong, and that support has made a difference at the Institute. So it doesn't matter, whatever Kyla and I and Zah think about diversity, it's the community who has come out and who has made this successful. And so I want to say thank you to you. And the community involvement and the strong support that we've gotten has led to a really exciting announcement, which is that Kathy Kinlock contacted us personally last week, Zah and Kyla, myself and Teresa, and announced that the Institute will be funding the Diversity Circles events for the ongoing future, which is a huge relief. So a big thanks to Kathy Kinlock, her leadership team. Lorcan did call me to confirm, so I know that it's for real. We're just speechless. We're so excited about that announcement. It was so amazing for Kathy to do that. She said that she did it in honor of Teresa, and in honor of everyone who cares about diversity and inclusion on this campus. And so that's made a big difference. We wanted to share that announcement with you, but I really want to say that would not have happened without the support of the community. It's the community support, the community strength, and your will that has done this. Everyone in this room and everyone who's been involved in any one of our events. So thank you to the community.